welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Actually, it still feels like morning here. It's only just 12 o'clock in the UK. We have a panel today. We have 4 speakers, myself, Franco Nicolucci, who's the director of the VAST Lab at the PIN, which is part of the University of Florence, Marinos Ioannidis, the UNESCO Chair on Digital Cultural Heritage from Cyprus, and Ronald Haynes from the University of Cambridge and the IFFF 3D Community Co-Chair. And we're going to run this, so each of us is going to speak for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for discussion at the end. You can use the chat to ask questions, and we'll come back to them at the end of the meeting. And also, if you look into the chat, you should find a handout with copies of our slides for you to refer to later on. So I'm going to begin by setting the scene. We know that 3D digitization of the cultural heritage is valuable. It's particularly useful. Could you mute the mics? Thank you. It's particularly valuable for conservation. It's useful for monitoring changes in the condition and looking at details of the condition of movable and immovable cultural heritage objects. It's widely used in research, has great potential in education and for tourism, for organising virtual visits and all kinds of activities. It's really important for documenting heritage that's at risk. We've seen its value following terrible fires at nationally important monuments in the last few years. And we know that it can provide people with access to heritage in places that are hard to reach, either because they're in out-of-the-way parts of the world, or they're under the sea, or they're in the tops of buildings. It can make heritage accessible for diverse audiences, for people who have limitations on their mobility or other reasons why they may not be able to access the heritage. So 3D is great, yet it's still expensive and time-consuming to do. So we really need to know how to do it well. And as with all digitization projects, it comes down to good planning and preparation. It's about being really clear from the beginning what the purpose of the project is and who the users of that content are going to be, so that if you have in mind creating a resource for conservation with a secondary potential use for education, you know what the needs of those audiences are, and you make sure that your content's created in a way that's going to be useful and usable by those people. It's about thinking about how you're going to provide access to the content, whether it's going to be online or offline, whether you need very high resolution in a heavyweight computer in a lab type situation, or whether it's going to be online. Are there any rights involved? Is there anything that you need to clear in order to make that content accessible? And also about thinking through what aspects of the cultural heritage and the quality of the content you're creating really matter. If metrical quality is important if you have a conservation purpose in mind, but in other potential uses, it could be the historical base of the interpretation that you're offering and the contextual information around the model that you're creating, which are really important to get right. It's always important to understand the standards and best practices involved to make sure that you're actually getting the result that you really want. Oh, I've gone forwards 2 slides. I'm sorry, I'm going to go back for a second. Because I wanted to talk about what all this means in practice. Effectively, you have to put in place the right workflow. You need to think about whether you're digitizing the content yourself, whether you're outsourcing. And in either case, you need Sorry, could people mute their mics? You need to make sure that you've specified the minimum quality that you need. And that in some cases, that means thinking about what the highest quality is you can produce that's affordable within the time frame, and that which allows you to deliver on the priorities that you set for your project, while at the same time protecting the objects during digitization. These are not trivial things to decide about, and actually getting the preparation right is really important. I'm mentioning standards and formats and capture of metadata again, because sometimes people leave these things too late in the workflow, and it is fundamentally important to get them right at the beginning. But now I'm going to hand over to Franco Nicolucci, who's going to speak more about the principles behind digitization. Franco, tell me when you're ready for your first slide.
Ready? Yes, thank you. Please. No. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm trying to give you in a very few minutes a critical understanding of what 3D digitization is about. So when you digitize some real object, some real thing, you produce, perhaps using specific devices, you produce one or more numeric files, what means a sequence of zeros and ones, which somehow represent the artifact. But such files are not intelligible to humans, because we cannot interpret easily zeros and ones, even if one is skilled in computing. So they need to be visualized to make them understandable. This is not always the case. For example, robots can work very well with this first result of digitization. But we must understand that 3D models are always the result of at least two steps. The one is acquisition, and the second one is showing it, usually on 2D devices, and using tricks to deceive the human eye to make them look three-dimensional, to have a depth. And these pictures on the right hand side date back to 600 years ago. The top one concerns perhaps the first artwork in which the painter used one of these tricks, perspective, to give depth to this representation of a sea. The bottom one on the right is instead a physical 3D model. In those times there were no computers, so no digital stuff, which was created by Brunelleschi, the architect of the dome of the Florence Cathedral, to win the contest and get the tender for being the chief architect. There is a funny story on that, which is also significant today. The Republic of Florence didn't trust him, so they put another architect to control him, famous one, Lorenzo Ghiberti, but Brunelleschi didn't like this. And he pretended to be ill for 3 years, so nothing happened. And the head, the management of the Republic told Ghiberti, you have the 3D model, do it. But he could not do that. Why? Because there was not enough information. So the model showed the shape, the final shape of the dome, but it didn't show how to build it. Next slide, please. So what is and how is a 3D model? Well, a 3D model is several things, and it has a different relationship with the real object it represents. As already mentioned, it's numeric dataset files, which are usable only, as already said, for robots, not for humans. The visual representation is obtained processing the results of digitization using some specific visualization software, and too often it is just pretty pictures. So it looks nice, but you don't know if it is good representation of the object. On top of that, uh, it is sometimes, very often actually, necessary to put information, additional information about the real object, going beyond the mere appearance of its shape. For example, the material in which some part of it is made, the conservation state, and so on. So a question arises, how can we compare to 3D models of the same real object? Well, I remember that some years ago with Kate, we were carrying out a project to provide 3D objects to Europeana. It was called 3D Icons. And we discussed a lot if two different representations of the same object were different 3D models or not. Another important question, how can we define and assess the quality of a 3D model? There are different aspects to be taken into account, and I am not aware of a system which can globally summarize all them. How coarse is the model? How well details are preserved? And how reliable is the model as regards important features? And last but not least, how difficult it is to use it? Usually one has to compromise between the different aspects because a very accurate model may be difficult to handle and so cannot be suitable, for example, to be used in a virtual exhibition. And finally, is a 3D model resilient to post-processing? Post-processing is always important because the initial file produced by the digitization needs to be filtered, sometimes it needs to be reduced in size, and in any case must be visualized. So there is post-processing which may damage or destroy some aspects which were initially collected. So resilience to 3D post-processing is an important feature. Of course, you have recognized the pyramids and three different ways, or two different ways actually. The first one is a photo to model the Cheops pyramid. Next slide, please. In conclusion, if the goal is to convey information only about the appearance of an artifact, there are already guidelines to do the task. Two important aspects are the philological approach, so the model in sum should be compliant to a study and a description of perhaps not provided to the viewer, to the user, to the visitor of this exhibition, but it must rely on sound scientific and artistic, for example, basis. If this is done, there are standards already, and there are efficient visualization tools. For example, 3D Hop, and on the right-hand side, you can see the model of the Cape Town City Hall provided on the internet by using 3D Hop. If instead the goal of the model is to support research and heritage or management, including conservation, or if the goal of the model is storytelling and co-creation, additional information must be included beyond the shape. This is usually called annotation. So the model must incorporate extra information beside the results of the digital acquisition. For example, this is what we are using in the forthcoming project on the Competence Center for Monuments and Sites, supported by the European Commission, which makes an extensive use of 3D modeling. So linking additional information and additional data to the geometry of the artifact replica. In any case, storage and retrieval are still a difficult issue. It's mainly concerning technology. Usually people put their model on Sketchfab, which is not convenient because it's there are lightweight models. So there is a big discussion about how such models could be stored and conveniently retrieved for display. I think I'm done, Kate. Is there another slide? No. So I give the word to Marinos.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Marinos Ioannidis, and the lady that you see there in 3D mesh form is the symbol actually of my country. It's Venus, the goddess of beauty, yeah? The lady over there. Yes. I will focus in my presentation in the quality. Quality in 3D. But there is where we come when we talk about documentation or digitization, because we are collecting not only data, we are collecting also metadata and paradata. So is equality here so far as paradata concerned, or metadata, or the data as such? And then what about the pre-processing of the data, cleaning from different kind of noises, or even the modeling, the post-processing? And then at the end of the day, whatever object in cultural heritage we have under documentation, there is a story, there is a memory, there is a knowledge, and there is identity behind. What is then the quality that we put so far as 3D documentation concerned in cultural heritage? The next one, please. And then here is an example. You see, it's a castle from Cyprus of an immovable object. On the left-hand side, you see the original. In the middle, you see the point clouds. And on the right-hand side, you see the 3D model. The three different images are representing the same object. The content, it's not the same, it's similar. And here is where we are coming and we say, is it now only about the X, Y, Z, so far as accuracy concerned, the quality? On the right-hand side, we see a movable object, again, a jewelry. And here is where we say, is it just the accuracy on X, Y, Z so far as the exterior concerned? What is then all about so far as the interior concerned? And there is where is the beauty so far as knowledge concerned, and so far as production technology, the ancient production technology, which is missing at the moment here in Europe. It's gone. We had it and it's gone. Next slide, please. Here is a small video showing again the castle. And I'm coming to continue from there where my previous good friend Franco stopped, to say, is it now just only because of the use and reuse of the data? That was the castle, the previous one object which I showed before. Is it now for the architects, for the conservation, for the preservation, or is it just now for the animation, for VR, AR applications, and so on? And again, this what you see here, it's again an approximation to the reality, to this what we have at the moment, or to this what it was several hundreds of years ago. Nevertheless, the issue is to decide what is actually quality and what is behind this quality, the complexity of the definition, or even of the definition for the documentation on a high quality of paradata, metadata, data, and so on. Next slide, please. And here, a very nice one example. You see, this is the oldest analog computer of the world. Here is a piece of knowledge hidden in this object. On the left-hand side, you see the object as it stands in the middle of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. This is the Antikythera mechanism. And on the other side, on the right-hand side, you see now the 3D model, which has nothing to do with the object presented on the left-hand side. Two different objects, but this is one and the same. What is the difference? That's the knowledge. And this is the story. This is the memory. This is a genius engineering, which is there hidden. 2,500 years ago, it was here made in Europe, in Greece. And this is what it's all about, 3D documentation. Bring the objects to talk, to tell to you, to the visitor, their story. Next slide, please. This was the Antikythera mechanism, by the way. So now, our 3D cultural heritage objects, yeah? The monuments, the museums artifacts, the sites, the movable and non-movable, yeah? It doesn't matter if they are paintings, yeah, or artifacts or whatever. They talk. They have always a story to say. That's there where we start. They talk to the architect, they talk to civil engineers, they talk to chemical engineers, they talk to archaeologists, they talk to historians, even to kids, kindergarten kids, elementary school kids, and so on. So do we understand them? And here is where now the story starts so far as 3D documentation concerned. Even at the beginning of the 21st century, where we have all this, whatever you have in your hand as smart devices, we are not able to understand whatever they have to say, whatever they want to transfer to us. And then I'm going back to close the circle once forever to Franco. How can we then do that so that we understand them, to access this knowledge, to preserve that, to protect that, and hand it over to the next generations? And having always in mind, and that's the high risk, on a time period when this high tech is in place, we are trying to document the past, but we don't have any standards in place, internationally recognized standards. And that's the pity. And that's the pity of the beauty or of the challenge that we are undergoing now. Next slide, please. My last one. And this is an EU study, which 2 months ago started, funded by the European Commission, DG Connect, and it is all about to define the complexity and the quality of the 3D. So to have a common ground when we are going to document a 3D object, what is a documentation, what is a quality out of that. And this is a task which we undertook in the last 2 months with several other partners, and we are open now to continue with you. And the final one slide, please, which is a request. No, it was the request to the study, but okay, it doesn't matter. There is a study now currently running so far as, yes, exactly this. This is a questionnaire online. Please, if you can please use your your smart device, and if you scan the code here, then you are going online. And if you are one colleague actively involved in the area of 3D documentation, your feedback counts, and you have a voice in the EU. And we want to hear it, and we want to count on you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Marinos. Kate, I know you're going back to the first slide. That's it. Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Ronald Haynes from Cambridge University, and thank you for joining the session, and thank you to the previous speakers, Marinos, Franco, and Kate. Next slide, please, Kate. So I'd like to just cover a little bit of some concerns and challenges and possibilities for interoperability and sustainability, and the challenges involved, which have been mentioned by everyone in the past. There are a lot of challenges involved, but there are a lot of potential. So I'll say more a bit about the group called the International Image Interoperability Framework, IIIF, and the 3D group. These are some of the things that I've been mapping with many participants across Europeana as well. Lots of people do lots of 3D work in a variety of ways. There are various workflows involved. You see some of those there. Hopefully you've been involved or benefited from some of those. Photogrammetry being so popular, increasing laser and structured light, CT scan, MRI scans, sonograms, etc. And of course, 3D modeling and the combinations of these. There are various output formats, mesh, point cloud, volumetric. There's metadata, paradata, all of these things been mentioned. I want to recap a little of that, but also each has its own challenge area. And in particular, if we want to be able to share with each other, to extend and blend collections, then outputs become important, and interoperability is our aim. In post-production, mentioned earlier also, there are a variety of aspects people will apply, techniques to optimize version control. So shown earlier some models and difference models. One of the challenges is, how do you track that? How do you know which was the reference model in a publication versus the latest version of that? Some of that will need to be solved by not only unique, universal identifiers, persistent IDs, but also some hint that this is a latest version of something. Easy case in point, photogrammetry involves a lot of 2D photography to then produce a 3D model. One of the things we covered in a workshop in Europeana last year was we need to start keeping all of the 2D data, because we may want to rework that for a newer, updated version of a model as algorithms improve over time. And that will take version control and IDs to make sure you know this is an updated version of what we have done before, and they're related. There is a challenge and opportunities to add 2D audio and animation, as well as annotation. And those too are important, individual, but also for interoperability. Here's an interesting scenario. So we know lots of projects and involved with ones with pieces of puzzles. Let's say you want to reconstruct a ruin and map that on top of an existing models of that. And we saw some examples from Marinos earlier. So you want to see what's there now, what's the ruin, what's a reconstruction of what we understand it looked like. In that, let's say it's a palace, could be a cathedral. We want to then put back on the wall some of the hangings, paintings and coverings. And those are in different collections in different museums and archives. And some of them are scanned, some of them need to be. So we might need to put the 2D back with the 3D, the existing with the reconstructed, all in the same visual space. Might want to put statues back inside these spaces. Might want to animate it, or at least give you the ability to move through what would be nested models and images. And then add on top of that a choral piece that was composed for that structure, so that you hear it within that structure. And there are people, again, doing work and projects on pieces of this, but to try to bring it all together, that's part of our challenge for interoperability as well. There are fundamental issues. What axis is up, what scale, pivots. There are access issues about copyright, licensing, and so forth. Again, mentioned earlier, want to re-highlight those. And here are just three of a number of points. We have whole lists of technical issues that have to be resolved, but these are three sort of key ones to keep our minds focused. Do you need to have objects nested in each other? Already mentioned about paintings and statues to put inside buildings, again, from different collections, but to reassemble them. What about enabling a model viewing across repositories? Sketchfab was mentioned earlier. Many people have work in that, but then have perhaps higher quality or detail pieces somewhere else, so that we are able to pull those together in some way, and you can, in the same space, move those together and see maybe a higher quality or higher color model all reunited together. This will be important and open up many promises for VR, AR, and XR, and Web XR in particular, with devices that we have. And finally, I've mentioned the universal persistent IDs for components and for the whole models. Think of a skeletal structure for natural history, down to the bone level, at least. For buildings, that might come down to probably not brick level, or stone level, but maybe corridor. And we saw some examples that Marinos showed earlier of exploding a castle and putting it back together, which is great. Next slide, please, Kate. So the 3D community group is part of the IIIF, and Europeana and IIIF have been working more and more together. There's something for the charter that I think will be helpful. Institutions interested in interoperability, coordinate strategies, facilitate conversations, working toward open standards. So we've been asked, it came up earlier in today's opening, there's a kind of audacious challenge here. Rooms tend to divide into two groups, about 3D and about standards. One group that says, it'll be great when someone sorts it out, and another that says, aren't we those people? IIIF 3D is trying to grasp that nettle, as it were, and it can only be done collaboratively with any and all who are involved with this. And so we have well over 100 institutions who've been involved with the process so far, and our discussions, we have monthly meetings online. So please join in. Quality, complexity, sustainability, these are all part of our conversations. We have presentations, but the work is to move toward something that will integrate and interoperate across the piece, 3D with the already existing 2D and audiovisual standards in place. We work with a number of natural partners, including about data preservation, CS3DP, sort of centered in North America, and Digital Preservation Coalition, more in Europe, and have had and involved in this continuing discussion with the Task Force on 3D content. The preservation bit, I think, starts to address an earlier question about archives someone raised, and we'll get to, which is we have to think backwards a bit, which is the long-term goal of preserving this material for the future. So putting all this effort into capturing now can't be for a short term, can't be for 3 or 5 years or 10 years. It has to be for the longer term. And there are a number of strategies for that, even as algorithms will improve over time. Next slide, please, last one. And so here are 3 or 4 invitations that hopefully you'll engage. We're looking for your user stories. How is it that you're involved with 3D now? And in particular, what is it you need from 3D models? So those links, which are in the handout as well, we're looking for your stories. And we have quite a number from a wide variety of people, architects, publishers, teachers, etc. But we want yours. And our aim is then to compile all this and try to share what comes out of that. The workflows that are involved with 3D production, again, to compare, contrast, compile that and share. And finally, we're looking at some of the main 3D viewers that are in use, that are popular, that are important. 3D Hop was mentioned earlier, Sketchfab, Universal Viewer, the Smithsonian a Voyager 3D, X3D, to name some of the top ones. If you are not in that conversation, please do join in. If you're interested in it, please follow and jump in. And finally, please come along to some of our meetings, and there's the link. Thank you very much. Back to you, Kate.
Thanks very much, everyone. Actually, I'd say you finished on a good note in that you're opening the floor for discussions, and this is our moment to invite questions to the panel and to for us to attempt to answer them. So I don't actually, because I'm sharing my screen, I don't actually have access to the questions in the chat. So I'm hoping that Tamara or Ad will help us with that. But
I believe you have some questions. Yeah. Can I please remind you of the time for the meeting? We have to close in 9 minutes.
Yes. One question came from Paulo, and he had a specific question about if 3D technology can also be used for archives. So I was wondering if maybe Marinos can say something about that?
Yes, of course. And why not? Of course, we are used in the archives to have 2D objects, let's say images, photographs, films, and so on. But yes, of course.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any other comments from the other panelists, maybe?
Just add that that's part of why we're also focusing on long-term preservation issues. And so please, yes, and we have archives involved in who are involved in the conversation.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. Another question came from Henk, and he is wondering what the panel considers to be the largest challenges, excuse me, for data providers to bring 3D content in a fair way to Europeana, and then fair with capitals. So, and in addition to that, he was wondering if Europeana could help by providing training in doing that, and maybe there are plans for that. Kate, is that something you can answer?
Well, I can attempt some kind of answer. I mean, one of the challenges with 3D FAIR is about findable, accessible, interoperable, and retrievable. And it's findability is about metadata. Accessibility is about providing the content in a format that makes it easy for Europeana's users to view it. But also FAIR comes with an agenda towards opening access. And one of the complications with 3D is that the access and rights in the content are often layered. So we have, sometimes there are rights in the original cultural heritage object, and there are often several different teams involved in the digitization who can acquire rights in the content if that is the way the project is set up. So you have to be quite conscious from the beginning if your goal is to move towards making a version of your 3D content openly accessible. You actually have to think about the rights issues from quite early on. So that's my attempt at an answer. Franco has a contribution.
Yes, very shortly. The main challenge is FAIR, all in capitals, of course, concerns research products. So research products have to be fair, and it's easier than when data produced by public administration, which have a different treatment. And for cultural heritage, sometimes you have to mix the two things. So it is, well, there are complications due to different legislation, due to different treatment of IPR, which Kate also noticed some years ago in the 3D Icons project we produced. a scheme of all the intellectual property rights involved in a viewable 3D model. And there are very many actors in this process. I believe that this is the main challenge. Technology is never a challenge. You can, never an issue. You can find technological solutions, but legal and all what is involved with management, data management is sometimes more tricky.
Okay, and there was also the last bit that was about can Europeana provide training? Is there from the tech community maybe some initiatives in that field?
Can I intervene about learning? Hello?
Yes.
Just to let you know that with a European project, which is called Delta Project, Digital Education for Learning and Training in Archaeology, which is running now with the University of Basilicata in Italy, University of Patra, the Open University of Patra, and Capodistria University in Athens and Brno University in Czech Republic. We are building a MOOC, an online course for digital archaeology. And in the 4 modules of this project, this online learning course, it is considered 3D for documentation and for preservation and conservation of archaeological heritage. So the online course, it's a good chance for us. And I would like to let you know this opportunity. The course will start in April and it will run until September. And this is a pilot course now, and we're supposed to spread it also in the next years. And the call for students and for who is interested in it, it will be open in March. So I can write here the site, okay?
Thank you, that's very interesting. Would you mind sharing a link to your program because
yes,
people
yes.
ask for that? Okay, if you can do that in the chat.
Immediately, I will do this.
So,
okay.
So at the end of the handout that I shared with everyone, we've included some links, including a link to a training hub which Karari has begun developing.
Fantastic.
And obviously some of those resources have a focus on archaeology, but some of them are more general. There's an excellent video training course which really produced by Visual Dimension, which really shows the setup for digitizing and some of the processes around content creation in 3D. So we did include a few resources, and it would be great to think that Europeana as a community could work together on some more and to provide links to other useful materials as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Considering time, there are more questions in the chat which we will not be able to answer in this case now. What are the main communication channels that you would like to suggest? Are there any in the document you just mentioned that people can reach out to when they have further questions?